Right, like I told you earlier, we're going to Ogun State, and you're really going to be excited about this one. Ogun State, under the leadership of Governor Ibikunle Amosun, is making giant strides and fast becoming the industrial hub of Nigeria.
Amosun is exploring value chains in agriculture, industry and technology to drive socio-economic development, as well as grow the state's monthly internally generated revenue from 7 billion to 10 billion naira before he bows out in the year 2019. Now, to this end, the 2018 edition of the Ogun State Investment Forum is focusing on agriculture, technology and industrialization to drive the economy.
All right, the governor has revealed that over 300 new companies have opened business in the state between 2011 and 2018 and invested between $200 million and $2 billion in the state. Ogun State Investors Forum, launched in 2012, brings together captains of industry from around the globe to hobnob with Ogun State government in order to tap from it.
Well, the theme for this year is consolidating the gains and accelerating the growth, and of course that would be held on the 20th and 21st of March.
Yes, indeed.
Let's now bring in the Commissioner for Agriculture, Honorable Adikbeju Adebajo. Also with us in the studio is the Special Advisor on Trade and Investment to the Ogun State Governor, Hafsat Abiola. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Good to see you, ladies.
Well,
and like we were trying to point out earlier, before we came on air, I need to stress that, you know, Ogun State seems to be gender sensitive or gender friendly.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, it's a modern and progressive state.
How does that make you feel anyway?
Well, I mean, I think that not just Ogun State, but Nigeria has realized the absolute necessity of ensuring that women are included in all levels of decision making. So you don't want a situation where you see a lot of women at the beginning of at the bottom of the ladder, and when you get to the top of the ladder, you look around and you say, where are all the women? Yeah. And so I think Nigeria has realized that, and a lot of enabling policies are being put in place to ensure that that happens. And of course, in Ogun State, where a progressive state, it's already happening.
That's really good.
All right, Hafsat Abiola, let me start with you as the Special Advisor on Trade and Investment. There is a sense in which, you know, we can say that no state survives without real investment or investment drives. What have you told the governor in this area to ensure that real investments take place as the advisor?
Well, the truth is that the governor has a very clear vision of his own. You know, when he was in the Senate, he was the chair of the Committee on Commerce, and as such, he visited many parts of the world and saw how countries were able to use business to grow their economies. And when he came into leadership in Ogun State in 2011, he already had a very clear plan. Also, he had a background of working with Lagos State in boosting the IGR of Lagos State as an accountant. His firm was one of the firms that worked with the government of Lagos. So he wanted very much to boost our IGR, and he wanted to do that by making sure that business was thriving in Ogun State, not just by taxing business. So if you come to Ogun State, you'll see that we're a construction site. We're building roads, we're building bridges, we're trying to upgrade our infrastructure so that we are the state that is logical for everyone that wants to do business with Lagos. We're the logical state to site their business, you know, and we're right next to Lagos. So in that way, geographically, we have an advantage. But if our infrastructure is poor, then we will lose that advantage. And so the governor has been expanding our roads, building bridges. We are also we have in the pipeline plans around rail and so many other areas. Power. We've just signed about $300 million worth of agreements with private sector actors to boost our power supply. So really, in many ways, the governor was keen to be able to sell Ogun State to the business community. And I'd like to tell you that it's been a huge success.
Yeah, it looks like investors are buying in. We hear that 75% of FDI into the country is actually in Ogun State. That's mind-boggling. Yes. Commissioner of Agri, Adikbeju Adebajo, tell us, since this investment forum started in Ogun State, 2012, we hear, that's about 5 years now, or 6 years, how much value really has it added to not only Ogun State, but to Nigeria in general, considering the fact, too, that Ogun State's share of the national purse or the national cake is almost nothing to write home about, yet you're able to perform such magic. Tell us about that.
Yes, I think one of the questions that the governor gets asked most frequently is, considering the level of the federal allocations that actually comes to the states, how are we managing to do all this? And I think it goes what my colleague said about being basically very prudent and smart managers. But since the investment, to go to your question, since the investment forum started in 2012, the figure that you quoted recently, we've seen increasing percentages of foreign direct investment coming, especially into the manufacturing sector. So let's say between 2012 and 2014, it was something like 65%. That number has now actually increased to 75%, as my colleague mentioned. So you can see that more and more investors are actually being attracted to Ogun State. And it speaks to what my colleague mentioned earlier on about the infrastructure that's been put in place. But let's also forget security. Because if there's no security, I mean, no investor would come in the first place. And so one of the very first things that this administration established was ensuring that there was a very peaceful environment where investors could come and be sure that their investments were safe. And so many things have been put in place, security, power, rail. We're in the process now of also building an airport, which will be an international airport. And so Ogun State is not called the gateway state for nothing. It's not just the gateway to Lagos, it's even the gateway to West Africa, because, which is talking to a population of maybe 200 to 300 million people, and even in terms of export. So there's really a lot that's happening in the state, and the state is really poised to be the place where you work, you can work comfortably, you can live comfortably,
and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
And enjoy the fruits of your labor, and also relax.
All right.
So it's all of those components.
All right, Hamzat. Well, we hear that you got about
Hafsat.
three.
Yes.
I saw Hafsat smiling there. You almost changed her name. Hafsat, yes.
Pardon me. There is. We hear that Ogun State has got about 300 new industries, at the moment. Can you just mention a few of them so that we aren't talking in abeyance?
Yes.
So that the people can understand that we're talking real investments.
Real investment.
Well, there's SAB Miller, which is one of the biggest breweries in the world, is now in Ogun State. We have Procter & Gamble. We have so many also of our older businesses. Nestle, flour mills have one facility in Ogun State. Thai Foods, which is one of their brands. We have also now coming on stream Olam, which is one of the very biggest commodity traders in the world that is coming. It's already present in northern Nigeria, but it's finally coming coming to Ogun State. Oh, you've worked with them before.
So as an auditor, I audited their accounts.
So you'll soon be able to see how they're doing when they come to Ogun State. And there are so many very big businesses, some of the world's biggest businesses. But I think that one of the key successes that the governor has recorded in Ogun State is even the support we give the micro, small and medium scale enterprises. The governor understands that all these big companies also need a supply chain that is strong, which is provided for by the MSMEs. So that sector is been carefully developed by the government. We're doing many things to do that. For example, the governor has an agreement, the government of Ogun State has an agreement with the Bank of Industry to give about ₦1 billion worth of loans. We gave half of that, and Bank of Industry provided half for MSMEs. We also have partnerships with international agencies like the German Agency for International Cooperation, and they are technical supporters. They provide microcredit enabling services and all kinds of other services across all industries in Ogun State to make sure that MSMEs can thrive.
All right, of course, we'd like to come to the challenges, because you guys are making it look like it's all honky-dory, everything is okay in Ogun State, but I'm sure there are challenges, along your path. We'll look at that later. But your portfolio is agriculture, and we hear about this agricultural revolution going on in Ogun State, especially with the metros rice and all of that. Tell us more about that. Beyond the rice pyramids that seems to have disappeared in Kano, and they're now showing up in Ogun State.
Absolutely.
Tell us more about that and other, strides that you are making in agriculture in Ogun State.
Well, I'm sure we understand the national perspective on agriculture. A country that cannot feed itself, is really in dire straits already. And so agriculture is important for so many reasons, because we need to be able to feed ourselves, because we need to be able to create employment for our youth especially. We have a youth bulge, what they call a youth bulge, and all those young people coming out of, not necessarily coming out of university, but even those who have chosen not to go to university. We need to ensure that we can provide employment for them. We also need to ensure that many of our industries, as we have said already, Ogun State is the industrial capital really of Nigeria. Many of those industries were used to importing their raw materials from abroad. With the change in the foreign exchange rate, it has become increasingly important that they can actually source domestically. And even when they're sourcing domestically, they would rather source their products from nearby than have to go halfway across the country. Okay. And sometimes because of the level of infrastructure generally, many of those goods actually perish. They spoil before they get to their destination. Yes. And of course, just for the economy and for the country, we used to be a country that exported a lot. We had ground-up pyramids and so many pyramids, cocoa pyramids.
Rubber, plantations.
Many of those thrive. Many of those tree crops thrive in the southwest: cocoa, rubber, cashew, oil palm. And so the agricultural revolution that's going on in Ogun State and in the rest of Nigeria is really bringing us back to basics and saying, we need to be able to, as President Muhammadu Buhari said, we need to be able to grow what we eat and consume what we produce.
All right. What about the value chain? Let's even talk about that a little. Let me stay with you a little. We've heard stories like Nigeria exporting yams, and raw crops, and that's not too good for the economy. Is the Ogun State government looking at ensuring that we're not exporting yams and all of that, but yam products that come from those crops in a way that it will add real value to us economically?
Absolutely. So when we talk about agriculture, I think I'm glad you asked that question. It's not just about farming or production, but it's also about processing, which many people think about. How do you convert, as somebody said, Kellogg's, produces maize, but they add a bit of sugar and they add a bit of vitamins, and all of a sudden they call it Kellogg's cornflakes, and you're paying a lot of money for it. So how do you actually convert those raw materials into food? Yes. Or sometimes those raw materials into raw materials which are required for industry. For example, in the case of cassava, there are so many byproducts from cassava, cassava starch, ethanol, so many of those byproducts. But it's not even just the traditional processing, which is manufacturing, that we're thinking about. There's also logistics. How do you transport the farm goods from one place to another? There's marketing. There's people who provide all the fertilizers and things that the farmers will need. So when we talk about agriculture, it's actually a huge value chain that comprises of production, processing, logistics, and of course Ogun State has been at the forefront of this. So many industries concentrated in the state that use those raw materials, especially in the value chains like cassava. And in the case of rice, for example, you talked about metros rice. We saw that there were no real significant rice mills of any scale at all in Ogun State. And given that Nigerians love rice, we eat so much rice.
Morning, noon,
so
and
we
night.
thought it was important that our farmers are able to actually convert their paddy into rice. So we set up in December 2 rice processing mills in 2 different senatorial districts in the state. It's landmark really for the Southwest.
Right, so the agriculture sector, just before I come to you, Hamzat, let me find out from you. The drive in yes, Hafsat. Yes. Just before I come to you, please, I'd like you to tell us what is the revenue, the percentage of revenue generation from the agriculture sector?
Well, that's a figure that's sometimes difficult to grapple with. Like we know, agriculture employs almost 70% of the Nigerian workforce. But when you look at the GDP, that percentage is much lower. It's more like 20-something%. Yes. So what we're trying to do in the agricultural sector is to see how agriculture can be much more of a business. Yeah. Instead of just being, it's a way of life, something that people do for their leisure or do for subsistence farming. And so when we talk about the value chain and really thinking of agriculture as a business, that's why we're talking about that. All right. And talking about how you can, improve, let's say, what you call your productivity. Right. how much yield do you get per hectare that you're farming. In Nigeria, we may be getting yields for cassava maybe 20 to 30 tons per hectare. Elsewhere in the world, it may be like 120 tons per hectare.
Places
so
like China, for example,
how do we close that gap? So the whole thrust is how do we make agriculture much more of a business so people can derive more income from it, and then it becomes more sustainable. Then young people will want to go into it.
All right, Hafsat, you talked about the MSMEs and what government is doing to encourage them. There is the issue of multiple taxation, which, if something is not done drastically, it could drive a lot of small businesses out of business, and they make up a huge chunk of you know, the business population. What is Ogun State doing to tackle that problem?
I'm happy to inform you that the governor constituted a committee in his first term to look into this issue, and that we've since sent a draft bill to the House of Assembly around streamlining of multiple taxation, multiple taxes, asking that instead of having businesses be taxed at state level, local government level, even ward level, that everything should be streamlined so that the businesses can actually make money. You know, so that's been, I think that should be passed any day now. In fact, if it's the last time that we had the members of the House of Assembly come to the Executive Council to meet with us, they promised that they would expedite work on that. So I hope that this will be coming very soon for businesses in Ogun State, and it would make a huge difference for them.
All right, let me also ask.
Hafsat.
Hafsat.
No, I wasn't. You can even say Afusa. It's actually, you will say Afusa.
I wasn't going to get it wrong.
I wasn't going to get it wrong
the third time. Hafsat. Yeah. Well, the government is also talking about encouraging backward integration and import substitution. How does the government want to go about that?
Well, without backward integration and import substitution, we're not going to develop. When you study Latin America, you study Asia, you study the countries in Africa that have advanced, you study even the United States, actually, which they never want you to. If you study their economic history, it's always pretty clear that it was import substitution and backward integration that really made a huge difference for them. And the governor is really pushing on this issue for us in Ogun State because he wants to provide a model of successful, non-oil-based economy for Nigeria. You know, where the biggest, most successful states in Nigeria outside of the Niger Delta is Lagos. And that's our commercial capital. Now Ogun State is the industrial capital, but even Lagos or every other state in the country has a huge unemployment problem. And the only way we're going to solve that is by looking for ways to achieve inclusive growth. How do we get young people, how do we get all people gainfully employed, earning a decent wage? So import substitution and backward integration will help us do that. And for example, if you look at I don't want to name any company, but one of the biggest companies in the world that is in Ogun State, 70% of its starch, they use a lot of starch, but 70% of the starch they use, they bring from outside Nigeria.
Presently?
Yes, yes, yes. Up until about maybe 2 years ago when we went into an economic recession, and when the exchange rate was no longer in their favor, it was a crisis for this company because they realized that they could not keep importing the starch. But then how do you get the cassava farmers to farm the quality of cassava that would provide the starch that the company needs? Because Ogun State is one of the top 3 highest producers of cassava in Nigeria. But the quality of the cassava might not be what the company needs. You know, all these companies have very specific requirements. So we were fortunate that one of our technical partners, the German Agency for International Cooperation, started working with over 2,000 farmers across Ogun State. They talked to the companies, and especially this company that I mentioned. They found out their specifications, and then they trained our farmers to supply to the specification. And they encouraged the farmers by providing a guaranteed market. By this I mean, they talked to the company and got the company to agree that if they got this quality of starch from our farmers, they would buy. So that's a guaranteed market, which farmers need, because it's a risk to go to the farm this specification, do all the work, and then the company in the end will not take your product.
Rejected outside.
Yes.
And that brings me to my next point, taking from the issue of the quality of the cassava and, of course, the byproduct starch. Over and over again, we hear that the EU countries and other countries reject, you know, most crops coming from Nigeria, beans and what have you, because somehow they feel it's not, it doesn't meet the international standard. Is Ogun State looking seriously at that, applying the same principle that has been applied for cassava and starch to other farm produce?
Yes, let me also speak on that.
Yes.
The EU rejected a particular batch of beans.
Okay.
Even the issue of yams, a particular batch was rejected. Now, obviously, the goal is to have 0 rejects. But, so when a particular batch is rejected, you know, there's a lot of negative press. But I want to put that in perspective.
Yes, please.
But one of the things that's important for farmers is for them to have information and to understand what buyers want, whether the buyers are domestic buyers or whether they are foreign buyers. And so that is something that
are you helping them with such information?
So we have what we call extension agents,
okay,
who go to the field and educate farmers on how much of different pesticides, how much fertilizer they should use. Because, so, for example, some particular buyers, especially the Europeans, the foreign buyers, have very specific requirements on how much of these pesticides or chemicals they can find in the product. So the more you have information about what your buyer wants, whether the buyer is domestic or international, the more you're actually able to work to their specifications, which is why the Ministry of Agriculture basically positions between farmers and buyers, off-takers, and ensuring that the needs of each are understood.
All right, let's not fail to talk about this investment forum.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to go there.
Yes.
I was going to, but let me, Madam Adekweju, let me tell you that my wife is also Adekweju.
Oh, she
and
is.
She's from Ogun State.
Absolutely.
Yes, Ilaro, Yelwa local government.
Oh, fantastic.
So
interesting.
So you are my in-laws. Let's talk about the Ogun State, the investment forum coming up at the moment, with the theme consolidating the gains, accelerating growth.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to?
Yeah.
Well, this is the 6th year of this administration, and a lot has been achieved in those 6 years. And going forward, we're looking to ensure that the gains are consolidated and institutionalized, and then we can then actually therefore accelerate growth, because Ogun State is really one of those states which is going to grow much more astronomically than it has done in the past. And so the forum is an opportunity, and this has been going on since 2012. It happens every 2 years. And we bring together all the investors, not just in the state, but potential investors in the state. And we talk to them about what's happening in the state. We talk about the strategy in agriculture. And agriculture, as we've talked about, is not just about production, but also about industry, industrialization, and also technology, which is increasingly becoming a game changer in terms of how we do things. So those are the 3 pillars of the investment forum.
When is it coming up?
It's coming up on the 20th and 21st of March, Tuesday and Wednesday. We're expecting multinationals, government officials, small investors, and we also have a keynote speaker who is Felipe Calderon, who's the former president of Mexico. And he shall be coming to share with us his experiences on developing Mexico during a very turbulent period. As you know, they're quite similar to Nigeria in terms of demographic, and Nigeria and Mexico are one of the countries called MINT. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and which are basically poised, Thailand, which are poised to be the next frontier after what they call BRICS, BRICS. So Mexico is a very relevant example.
Let me ask you something very practical before we let you go now. Ogun State contributes a lot to the Federation account.
Yes.
Are you looking at, but of course it doesn't get much in terms of, you know, from the government purse. Are you looking at demanding your rights, more or less?
I think the governor certainly is pushing for what we call fiscal federalism, the idea that we should work and we should eat. Ogun State is one of the leading states in contributing IGR to the petroleum-based income, yes, to the federal government, which we feel honored to do. It's just that we're doing that because we have all these companies and industries in Ogun State. And as they're paying so much money to the federal government, they expect services which cost money. But when the money is distributed across the federation, Ogun State is in the last tier of states to receive funds from money we've contributed. So we're about 26th among 36 states. And we're in the top 5 among states contributing, so non-oil based money. In fact, I think we're number 2. So the calculation doesn't quite work. And we have to be careful that we are providing what our industries and our companies demand. We need to provide the roads, we need to provide the bridges. Our people are willing to make the sacrifices, and they are already doing that. But we can't do it without funds.
Can you tell us very quickly the ease of doing business? That's our last question.
Yes, ease of doing business.
Yes, how is that?
2014, Ogun State. Well, in I think the very first one was before the governor came in, around 2010. And Ogun State was among the very worst states in terms of ease of doing business. But by 2014, when they did the next subnational ranking, Ogun State had moved to 5th position in the subnational ranking of the World Bank. And they're in the course of doing another ranking now. So we are hoping that we will see even more improvement.
Even better.
Yes.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture, Kweju Adebajo, who incidentally is Ike's in-law. And the essay on trade and investment, Hafsat Abiola Costello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And it's my pleasure too to say my son is Yoruba. He's Ogun State, Abeokuta.
Please join us on Tuesday and Wednesday.
That we're family.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us on the show, and we wish you the very best as Ogun State continues to make strides in development.
Thank you.